Welcome to Released, the story behind the software. I'm Derek Holt, CEO at Digital.ai. Throughout this series, we've talked about how AI is fundamentally changing and reshaping the enterprise. But as organizations race to adopt AI, one question is becoming interestingly important. Who or what should be trusted with access? AI agents are beginning to work alongside humans, making decisions, accessing systems, and taking actions on our behalf. This creates enormous opportunity, but it also introduces an entirely new set of challenges around identity, privilege, and governance. And these challenges are no longer theoretical. In just the past few weeks, we've seen some of the first widely publicized examples of autonomous AI agents crossing security boundaries and causing challenges. We have a huge opportunity to get ahead of this, and that's why I'm so excited to have today's guest with us. Today's guest has helped lead enterprise security throughout every significant technology shift over the last 25 years, from SaaS to cloud and now to AI, at iconic companies like HP and Symantec, and now as CEO of Delinea, a company that is at the forefront of helping organizations manage and secure privilege access for both people and AI and agents. Delinea recently published research showing that 90% of organizations are feeling the pressure to relax identity controls to enable AI, even though most still can't fully see where these agents are, what they're accessing, what actions they're taking. So I am super excited about today's conversation. Art, welcome to Released.
Derek, thank you very much. I'm excited to have the conversation. It's a good time.
Fantastic. Well, listen, before we look at sort of today and look forward, I always like to kind of ground a lot of these technology patterns on the past, right? We've seen enough history and many of these things do repeat. I think back to when we moved to SaaS and to cloud, right? And those things kind of happened in parallel. That didn't just expand the attack surface, obviously. It also created this explosion of identities that I don't think anybody was really prepared for, right? We didn't inventory them. We probably didn't manage them out of the gate. They moved faster than the infrastructure provide. Like, before we start to talk about AI and agents, do you think the industry has actually ever caught up to that transition, or are we still navigating that transition and the new one?
Yeah, I would go back even further. I mean, I think identity just as a domain within IT and in security, there's still a combination of, is it owned by IT and is it about just giving access to infrastructure, or is it actually a security tool and owned by security? And I will tell you that even in most of my conversations, it's probably 50-50. Some companies are letting identity now move into the security space. And so about half of the companies I talk to, the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, owns the identity infrastructure and access. And then the other half, it's owned in the application space because it's just about giving access to these applications. And the difference between the two tends to be, on the IT side, it's about availability and access and ease of speed of getting connected to the things you're using. And it's less about provisioning and preciseness about the privileges that you're given. On the security side, now they're focused a lot more about, okay, Art can get access, sure, but what should I allow Art to do when he's there? And I think that's one of the big sort of transitional things that I see happening. And that goes way before cloud. And so, every sort of major infrastructure change, whether it was the mobile one or cloud or others, creates new sort of security challenges. And that you rightly point out, the cloud and SaaS, there's just an explosion of connections. And it's not just the humans getting access. It's actually, now Salesforce talking to Clary, and those each have an identity. They're connecting. How over provisioned or under provisioned are they? I don't think a lot of companies have a view into that. And so it's just kind of magnified a problem that candidly has existed for a long time, even before those two domains came into it.
It's always so interesting to think about too, is as much as obviously we live and breathe software, it is still one of the more young engineering disciplines, right? We go back in industrial engineering and even electrical way predates software engineering. And it's interesting to see what we're navigating now of the sort of 50, 60 years worth of software archaeology that's been built up. And to your point, we tend to be really bad at taking things away. We just keep adding new things on top.
Add new stuff. And, like it's interesting in the security space and too. So I'll step away from identity for a second and just talk security. Like every single major sort of big platform change, which it was laptop software from sort of the distance. So your laptops, you then went to mobile, you went to cloud, you have SaaS. Now, of course, AI. The race to create functionality is always the focus of the platform creators and the pieces. And so what they did, thank goodness to me, because I've spent 30 years in the security space, is security was always an afterthought. Functionality, new capabilities is always the thing, how you get your platform adopted. And so less thought went into security and security functionality, or even how it's going to impact the security side of the world. And so you've just watched this, as our lives have become more digital, crime and adversaries have sort of followed that. And because the platforms have focused more on functionality and less on the security of the platform, it just creates a lot more mess. And so we've been kind of chasing that for, the last several decades. And it's, as we move now into AI, I think people are giving some nod to security because people pay attention to it a little bit more now. But the reality is you're still seeing pretty significant failures of security architecture or security design in these platforms as they race to try to beat each other. So.
Sure. And it is, once again, history repeating. It is move fast and then figure out identity and security.
We'll figure this out at the end. Don't worry about it. You got to keep us feeding. So like it helps my small little industry continue to stay relevant in these crazy times.
Critical. And I guess exactly. So unpack this a little bit as we now like switch gears to say, okay, this is a problem that's been around for some time. It's a problem that we've, let's say, historically chased as opposed to maybe being ahead of as an industry. I think that's fair to say.
Yep.
Now we have, at least from my experience, and I've been through a few of these as well, the fastest proliferation of new technology, the most throw your hands up and let's go approach to adopting technology in the form of first AI and now AI powered agents. In our world, right? Like they are writing code, they are deciding on what software gets released. Like there's a whole bunch, and take that to every other discipline within the enterprise, and you're starting to see just not just adoption, but mass scale usage. How does that fundamentally change, accelerate, expand the identity security problem we've been dealing with for some time?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've built a lot of the infrastructure to be able to manage humans. And I think the workflow, the process, those types of things, they function well. It doesn't mean that every company is doing it well, but the capabilities are there to be able to sort of control and manage and monitor sort of humans interacting with systems. I think where we had a blind spot is on machine identities connections. These service accounts have been around for a long time. API connections between applications have existed for a long time. AI has just kind of made machine identities sexy again. So now the board is talking about machine identities, whereas before I don't think they could even define what it was. And so what you see now is, before machines are very deterministic in what they're going to do. And so the risk to an API call going rogue was pretty small. What the risk was, a bad guy got access to that machine identity and then did something with the over provision sort of permissions that were assigned to it. The difference now is that AI is non-deterministic. It is using machine identities, using these over provisioned credentials, and then sometimes it's my credential if I'm creating my own agents, and then deciding, what it needs to do to solve the problem I asked it to solve. And it is extraordinarily flexible. The AI is extraordinarily flexible at trying to find a path. And that's why you see these breakouts. That's why you see the kinds of random damage. And it's not because AI is evil or rogue. It's because it's trying to solve the problem you asked it to solve. Yeah. And it just is a lot more creative about how it gets there. And I think that explosion of use of these machine identities that were candidly not managed well before is the sort of underlying problem. And now that everybody's I'm all in. I'm on AI. I mean, look, I'm a crazy CEO who's telling my company, like, go and use AI, go figure it out, like driving productivity in the engineering side. We're way faster on, business development. There's just so much value that you can see potentially out there for the use of AI that, it's just getting connected to a lot of different things. And if you don't step back and really say, okay, how is it going to connect? What is it doing after it connects? Can I see that? Can I control it? Do I have any policy about it? Like, that is going to be your challenge. It's not going to be finding all this AI. It's going to be protecting the sensitive assets you care about because it's going to connect to those things. Like, what's it doing once it does that?
Exactly. Yeah, we've heard it more recently described as like protecting your alpha, right? Like as your differentiation in the market. I also think, and we're seeing this certainly, but the regulatory apparatus behind all of this that isn't just say this is a good thing to do, but this is a thing you have to do, as is often the case, is also still trying to catch up. And it's funny, Art. I'd heard you either heard or read you describe AI agents as like acting at machine speed, deeply integrated into privileged user spaces, but potentially with no inherent accountability, right? Like, I guess we could fire an agent, but like, I don't know exactly what that looks like. Talk about how the frameworks need to evolve in order to catch up to that.
So this is a little more philosophical. So I'll take a step away from technology for a second, and you look at, and I'll just use the Hugging Face example. So that's been in the news. People are looking at it. It's like, for those that don't know about it, it's, an OpenAI model broke out of its cage and basically attacked a third party
successfully
company. Successfully attacked, got into. Luckily, it wasn't like super critical infrastructure it got into, but it still got in there. Mm-hmm. And so look, if a human did that human's going to jail. And so who has the accountability there? Is that Hugging Face's problem and now they got to deal with it? Is it OpenAI as a company? Is it the folks that were driving the project to look and see? Like, who is accountable for that damage? Because guaranteed there's damage. Like, you don't want your name associated with a breach. You don't want to have to clean up after it. Like, there's a lot of costs that got created there. But who pays? And I think this is part of the challenge we've had in technology and some of the backlash in society against big tech is there's kind of this immunity that the big tech companies have for the damage that gets created by their adventurism, if you will. And there's a ton of innovation, and that's great. And we love that as society, and we're getting a ton of value at it. But there's also externalities. There's costs that get created. And so when I think about what regulation should do, like, I am not a fan of saying, having a regulator try to figure out which model should go out or not, because that's just like, it's a little dumb. Like, they're never going to know us enough to be smart about what should happen or not, and we'll lose. And I think there is kind of an arms race against other countries and other dominance. And if you want the economy of the U.S. to continue to flourish, you want AI to be the best in America. I think the challenge we have, though, is that's going to create some externalities, like Hugging Face is a small example. I mean, we're waiting for the big one, but that's a small example. So who should be accountable? And I think the right regulatory approach is to make the technology companies responsible or accountable for the externalities or the costs that get created when they do these things. And I think if you do that structurally, companies make better decisions. They'll make their own decisions. They'll advance and they'll drive innovation. They'll continue to do that. But they'll also put more effort into the safeguards. And I think that's kind of right now, is in my mind, what's missing in AI. Anthropic, I think, is trying to do the right thing. But they're still a for-profit company. They're still racing to try to get there.
And so right?
The incentives are incentives, and the stakes are humongous. I mean, we're talking about trillion-dollar IPOs. I mean, the stakes are extraordinary. And so we're going to have to put some boundary lines in there. Otherwise, it'll be kind of all holds bar. And you have, the difference between, the Anthropic, which has kind of earned the community's view of, they're the responsible AI company, and OpenAI is a little more free and loose. But the reality is they're both racing hard to try to capture the market. So
absolutely. And to your point, a whole bunch of other folks behind both open weight models as well.
Of course.
Right?
Of course. So and then other international models.
Yeah. Exactly, for certain. So play on that a little bit, right? So to bring it back into the kind of core topic here, these frontier models are advancing at a pace, again, I have not seen, right? Like
It's
we now
amazing.
just we got Opus
Amazing.
5 in the last week. Soul 5.6 has been super interesting, and there's just one after another. It's funny. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it used to be if they did a podcast every week, there wasn't enough news to talk about. Now it's like we might have to do 3 a week to try to keep up with
You're
everything.
gonna have to do one tomorrow because there's gonna be new stuff.
Exactly. The docket is
Yeah.
like infinitely full. But one of the things that comes out is as things become more capable or more autonomous, does it make the identity problem worse because obviously the agent's more capable, it has more privileges, it can do more things? Or is there like an argument to be made that eventually the models themselves may help solve the problem?
Look, I'm on the side. I think it makes it harder. I think it makes it harder for companies. I think I'll just give you like an example, some simple example, right? So, a lot of what happens today inside companies is I've been given access to Claude Enterprise, and so Delinea uses Claude. We're very happy with the product. I think it's been really effective for us in a lot of ways. But I am going to build some agents for myself. And so I create an agent, I give it my credentials, it behaves as art in the environment. And then as that agent is going out and doing some work for me, it spawned 12 or 15 or 20 different agents. Now they may be more controlled, but they're still using art's credential. And so if it needs to do something, it's just trying to solve my problem. It's just trying to get to and it'll look through like the challenge that we have with humans or the benefit, I guess, with humans is they're not going to look through every file in SharePoint to try to find a credential to get access to a thing they want. But AI will do that and it'll do it in like 35 seconds. Right. And so the reality is that creates a challenge. And so a lot of companies are like, okay, well, how do I deal with that? Well, I'm going to use the same infrastructure I have. I'm going to provision an account for every single AI agent. I'm going to scan my environment. I'm going to look for all the agents that exist. Like, good luck. You're never going to find them all because I just spun up 15 for my little thing and then they disappeared. And so like, you're never going to be able to create an inventory of that. And so I think the model for how we have to think about identity control or identity security in an agent world is just going to be different. And it's not going to follow the exact same patterns that we had before, not if you want it to go fast. Yeah. And I think this is where companies are struggling. And you saw it in our research, release security controls, like make it easier, like relax some of the things that you would normally do. Like, I don't think that's the answer either. That's nuts. That is definitely nuts. And so I think what has to change is at least the approach or the model and the process that people go through. And so that's some of the work that we're trying to, obviously we have an opinion and we're pushing it. But we're also learning too. Like, let's be clear, like we're engaging with customers right now and it feels a little bit like, we're a $500 million company, but we're in startup mode a little bit on the AI side and sort of doing product market fit discussions and adding capabilities in real time. Because the reality is the model is going to be different for AI than it was for humans and than it was for machine identities. It's kind of this weird blend of those two kind of behavior styles. And that's just radically different. And so we're going to have to change the model, in my opinion.
It's super interesting. It is, every company, I think, is back to being a startup company, right? And if they aren't, they're probably fooling themselves, right? In terms of being really nimble. And to your point,
if you think you have this, you are definitely
wrong.
fooling yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's going to change in the next week. So
yeah, for sure. Or if you do have it, go raise a venture fund and just do that because you're ahead of everybody else, right? The one thing that I would go back to the research, you mentioned the research, I thought super interesting. And again, I think there's just, we need more of this in the industry, right? More of these views because you start to confuse. And even for me, I get, sometimes you get blur the lines between what's the research and then what is the press talking about. And these things are a little bit different. One of the things that jumped off at me was what felt like a higher level of confidence by many enterprises that they're ready for AI driven. I was shocked. I had to reread it a couple times. And then it sounded like a couple counterpoints to say, but we're not really ready, whether that's a governance model missing or whatnot. Where do you think that middle ground between some maybe exuberance and maybe a little bit of false confidence and reality is?
Yeah, look, we called it the confidence paradox in the research just because it was such an interesting counterpoint where you have companies basically saying, yes, we are prepared and ready for AI. And then you ask them, okay, well, how do you find it? What tools are you using to see it all? How do you control it? And the answer is kind of crickets. You're like, okay, you have no idea what's going on in your environment. But the reality is there's so much push by the CEO to actually get in front of this. Like you kind of have to lean into it as confidence. So I think there is some elements of that obviously is in the research. And, I think that's part of it. But I do think it's a lack of real understanding of how they're going to approach it. And so everybody is experimenting, and they have identity tools, right? And so some companies are more advanced and they provision accounts and they come with privileges and they manage it. And then they do, privilege management technologies like Delinea is to help to control access and privilege elevation within their environments. And they're like, okay, we're going to use that. And so that gives them confidence. And then they try to enforce that on AI and they realize, I can't really see my AI. I don't really know like where it is or what it's doing. I may have provisioned it in an account. So I've given the AI agent, especially the corporate deployed agents, not personal deployed. Like if I'm creating them, they have it's very difficult to track that. But if you're deploying an agent for infrastructure change things, you may be able to provision it and give it rights, but the challenge is you have no idea what it's doing after it logs in. And so a lot of the technology controls out there for access essentially are front door permissions, but they're not like which rooms are you going into and what are you doing when you're in those rooms. And I think that's part of the challenge that a lot of companies have today is they may have some of these things in, but it was just built for something different. Yeah. And so they're not able to see it all. So then when you start asking the second level questions, like, okay, well, do you know what your AI is doing? They can't truthfully answer yes to that because they have no idea because they don't have capabilities or infrastructure to see it, at least not yet. And so that's some of the work that that's the stuff that we're working on now to try to say, look, can I give you a tool that says, I'm not going to search and try to find it all because that's, I think of that I Love Lucy. Now I'm dating myself for real. You dated me at the beginning of the intro and now I'm dating myself again.
I'm right there with you, by the way.
Yeah, so but I Love Lucy with that chocolate thing off that, like that pathway. It's probably a meme now. My kids probably do know what it is. But that's what I think about like AI inventory. Like you're going to scan and try to find AI. Like you're just I Love Lucy on that candy thing. Like good luck. What's more important is, do you know what sensitive assets you care the most about? And can you filter and protect those things and make sure you know what AI is doing with them? I don't care how many AI agents are there if it's not talking to my sensitive assets. Yeah. If it's as soon as it talks to my sensitive assets, I want to know what the AI is. I want to know what it's asking to do. I want to be able to set policy on it. I want to know whether it's Art logging in or it's Art's agent logging in. I want to be able to differentiate. And if you can do that, that to me is a different approach that I think will work better for AI than the model we've had for humans.
It's super interesting. And I totally agree with you. It sort of flips the problem upside down and then also recognizes that just like we have a different identity construct for humans as we did machines, this also has a different identity construct that's required. And again, to go back to the beginning of our discussion, the industry has made this mistake over and over again, right? Like when we were all on-prems, a perpetual software, we were like, hey, let's apply the same identity to SaaS. And like, it didn't work. Maybe it worked for a while and then it started to not work. And so I think it's exactly the right way to think about it. The next question, not to like turn this negative, but while we're figuring that out, we're also seeing that agents getting compromised is inevitable. Like that is going to happen. It's probably happening, even the ones we don't know about, et cetera. There's a very real chance that this is less about not just being able to track what got to what assets, but we won't even know where breaches are coming from. Here in the near term, this is something we do a lot with we have a part of our portfolio that we do code obfuscation, which makes the code sort of hard to reverse engineer. AI has made it so easy to reverse engineer. And we're seeing this where people are going, hey, I used to obfuscate just my most important assets. Now I got to obfuscate everything because we got to assume that it's going to be, which is good for our business, but is a real hurdle for the industry to catch up. But when something like that inevitably happens, how should organizations be preparing for this? How should they be thinking about it? What should they be doing differently, like immediately?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the gap. I think what you talked about there is the time gap between when we used to get breached and then the monitoring you had. How would you respond? And so you're trying to make that as short as possible. And I think AI just makes it way more complicated because it spins up a bunch of things. It also is smart, and so quote unquote smart, um, because it will probably do research to try to figure out, okay, where am I going to get caught or not get caught? And it's going to be designed to do that by the adversaries that we have out there. So, yes, there'll be mistakes like what happened at Hugging Face, and there'll be some arbitrary damages that gets had. To me, that's like a car accident. That's not something that's on purpose necessarily, but it is a car accident. It's systemic. What I'm more concerned about is the adversary creating these smarter agents that are looking for and evading detection because they can. And I think that's going to be the piece. I think for me, obviously, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm identity security. So here we go. But but look, I think the reality is you need to make sure you have your basic infrastructure. Again, you go back to the basics on this. Make sure you have access control at the edge. Important. But the thing that is going to help you find and stop the stuff inside, because it's inevitable that AI or some human leveraging AI is going to break in. They're just that good at it. They're going to get in. The adversaries are super talented, and AI just makes them faster and smarter. Is you actually do want to have better discipline internally around privilege management, around access control, because that's how you're going to limit the blast radius. And so in cybersecurity, we talk about sort of the intrusion, whatever, but then it's, now you've got a bomb in there. How do you control the blast radius so that the damage is localized versus spreading out throughout the whole company? Yeah. And privilege management and access control is how you're going to be able to do that. Some of it is network segmentation, but even that, once you have access to a certain extent, you could get access across those boundaries if you have credentials. And so if you have a more robust identity security model, they will trip over stuff because they will log in. There'll be login failures, which then can trigger visibility. And I think that's how you're going to start to limit this stuff, because otherwise it'll happen so fast. It'll be sort of blinding for all of these companies. And so investing in patch management, that's kind of back to the basics, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Two kind of governance elements. I want to kind of double click on that last view. The first one is more of a little bit of an aside, but it's one that I'm always excited to talk about, which is every time there's a new evolution, a shadow something emerges, right? So SaaS was shadow IT. Prior to that, it was, I guess, bootlegging CDs or something. And now it's shadow AI. What we're talking about today is primarily, maybe with the exception of the threat vector or the attack vector, is primarily deployments that our teams know about but need to put guardrails around. It's really, really hard to protect against something you can't see. Like what are companies, when you talk to a lot of companies, you guys work with a lot of companies, like how are people thinking about shadow AI in terms of balancing the experimentation, trying things, which I guess is part of the process, versus, oh boy, we got a problem?
Yeah. So look, if you talk to IT security, they hate shadow anything. So you put shadow in front of it and it's the bad thing. I will tell you again, this is Art Gilliland's opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think we are wasting our time trying to find it all. I really do feel like you're chasing the rabbit on that. Any attempt at quote unquote trying to find all of the agents, all of the stuff that's happening in your environment is kind of destined to be a failure, because AI is too fast. It creates things on the fly. The example I gave, Art creates one agent, that agent spawns 15 agents, and then those agents disappear. So I think searching and finding and trying to inventory all the shadow AI is a waste of time. Now, that is very contra to what you're hearing in the industry, and most of my customers think inventory, because that's a typical security model. You can't protect what you don't know about, and so go and do an industry model. But you and I have been in this industry a long time. Like, how many people have an accurate CMDB? Like, how many people have an accurate asset database? And those things are physical a lot of times. Some of them are virtual, but most are physical. Like, people sucked at that. Like, this thing, they have no shot. You have no chance. And so let's not waste time. Let's take this is the different approach. This is, why don't we think about what are the 10 or 15 or 100 or 1,000, if you're a huge company, assets you really care about, and then get in front of those, and then use that way of saying, okay, every time an AI thing or an art looks like an AI or whatever it is tries to talk to this thing, I'll categorize it. Now I know that there's a thing out there trying to talk to a thing I care about.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, it's building inventory. Don't get me wrong. You still are building, but you're doing it in reverse. You're not trying to find all the shadow AI and all the stuff out there because that's impossible. But you are saying, look, here are the 15 or 25 or 100 or whatever the number is, assets I really care about. I want to know who's talking to them. And I want to know if it's a human talking to it or if it's art's agent using art's credential talking to it. And if you can differentiate, you can set policy. Art is allowed to do what I provision them to. Art's agent can only read or can only do whatever. You can set more controls. That to me is the way we're going to do this. And anything other than that, I think, is going to be a lot of work and a lot of effort and not a lot of benefit. I think we're gonna waste a lot of time and energy there.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I guess it's coming back every time we've had these shifts. The paradigm change needed to happen in parallel. And so maybe one last question. Then I'm going to talk a couple forward thinking things, and then we'll get you out of here and back to business. But one of the things that is always popular with our audience, and frankly, selfishly, is really interesting for me is. When we have guests on, they are working typically with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, et cetera, of customers, right? Getting to spend time with CISOs and CIOs and CTOs. And one of the things everybody always wants to understand is when you think about across those, you don't have to name names, but you start to think about maybe the top quartile that's out front on this, the topics we've explored here today. What are some of the patterns you're seeing in those organizations, both in terms of what they're thinking about, but also how are they keeping up with the latest and greatest, right? As things move so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if I talk to, look, I probably talk to 20, 25 customers every couple of weeks. And so I try to spend a lot of time with customers because
finger on the pulse.
You can't build good product if you don't talk to customers. I mean, totally that's just straight up. And I talk to tiny companies and big companies. And so because tiny companies tend to be a little faster and big companies have a lot more money. So you got to talk to both. But I think one of the things that I see for companies that are leaning into this is it's almost always a mandate from the CEO. There tends to be a SWAT team, an AI SWAT team. So it's separate from IT. It's very similar to the way we dealt with cloud originally. You had cloud SWAT teams, and that cloud team made every decision around cloud. And then when it got more mainstream, then they threw it over to IT and security. That's happening again in AI. What is different is security has a seat at the table. They tend to at the more advanced companies, and that there's a mandate obviously to move fast, which is where the pressure for relaxing security controls come. But the ones that are doing it well, I think, are trying to hold the line and being thoughtful about the risk they're assuming. They almost always follow the same pattern, and this is probably a horrible thing to say on a podcast, but they start with Copilot, and they realize that is not going to get it done for them, and they move to something else. In our case, that was Copilot, and we still use Copilot for some things that it's good for. But then we moved on to Claude Enterprise, and we use that. And a lot of the companies I see have evolved to that. And so they start with experimentation, and then they realize, okay, that's not going to get it done, and they move to a real model like the Cloud Enterprise model and Cursor, and there's others that are good out there. They also are tending to let their employees experiment. That was one of the things that I saw in early. I think what they're wrestling with today is the same thing that we wrestled with is, okay, I just blew through my token budget in the first 6 months of the year, like holy cow. And so they're now starting to realize I need more management infrastructure. And so it's not just about get AI into people's hands, which was kind of phase one. It is now, okay, how am I going to govern this so that I can afford it? Because that's the piece. And then the last thing that I would say that I think the best companies are doing is they're not actually in the sort of free-for-all mode anymore. They're now in here are the 2 projects that I'm going to AIify. I've figured out what the ROI is, and I'm creating an investment model to monitor it and manage it. And I think they're sort of grinding through the reality of the process change that has to happen, because AI doesn't just make the work faster, it changes the work. And I think they're realizing that and putting their hands around, okay, I actually need like change management. I need business process reengineering, and I need those people to be very fluent in AI. And I think that's going to be, I'm sure that's how you're discovering it when you're on your
Exactly.
development
Yeah.
side. Like we're
Yeah.
re-engineering our SDLC because of
Yep.
AI and how
Yep.
it changes sort of the roles of the different parties that we used to use. And so it's a pretty significant change. And AI is not great for everything, but it's good.
Yeah.
It's really great for some things
Yeah.
and an accelerant in most other things.
That's right. Now it's super interesting. This is probably for a different podcast, but one of the things that we've been blogging on a little bit about is a lot of the attributes you just described, like early experimentation, kind of giving people the ability to try new things. The financial side that always eventually becomes a reality, right? Like token maxing is
CEOs are like,
something
what?
we'll.
I just spent
Yeah, yeah,
what?
exactly. And I think, I mean, just look how fast things have gone. We went from
Yeah.
4 months ago, everyone said the best way to measure usage is token maxing.
Yeah.
Ironically, I think it was mostly the Frontier Labs that said that for obvious reasons. And now
Exactly.
everyone's like, whoa, like that seems
Yeah.
unreasonable. And then exactly what you described on having to rethink in not all instances, because we've definitely evaluated a process that said, hey, we do this once a year. It's just not worth to AIify it. And so like
Yeah.
on to the next thing. It's funny, there are very real parallels to how large enterprises adopted cloud in each of those segments you mentioned, right? Like
I think it's almost identical. It's just
almost
faster.
exactly. And so
It's just way faster.
FinOps will eventually become AI FinOps, right? Like
Yep.
and you're seeing some really interesting technology emerge there. And then, the lift and shift, we found out quickly that didn't work for cloud workloads. And so it was about re-engineering and microservices and whatnot. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all new, it's all faster, but it's all a little bit repetitive from, which is the good news
It's
when
a
you
little bit
start
like
to get to our
Groundhog's
point.
Day. It's just a little, it's
Totally.
an interesting twist on Groundhog's Day, right? So
Keeps
it
us
looks
in
very
business though,
similar.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right.
it looks very similar, but that's what makes it fun, right? I mean, I
It's
think
exactly
that's
right. Well, listen,
it's gonna
I
be
want to
fun.
make sure our big cogs into your time. The one thing we like to do at the end, and this was super,
Yeah.
like, this is fantastic as I expected. One thing we like to do at the end are sort of rapid fire. So these are like
Yeah.
attempt to
Great.
not think too much. Less words are better. If you need to go on, it's fine. No, there's no actual rule book, but I want to rapid
I
fire
will
a couple
try
of.
this. I will try to stay
Okay,
tight to
I
it.
struggle with it, to be honest with you. So I'm saying out of personal experience. So a couple of things, rapid fire, that we'll go through, and then we'll close out. So first, biggest myth in identity security today.
I think the biggest myth is that you think you have it all.
Yeah, great one. Second, most overhyped AI security trend.
I think the overhyped security trend right now is visibility, like being able to scan and find it all. That to me, that's a lot of noise and not a lot of benefit. Because
Yeah,
then you just
exactly.
know that you have a bunch of stuff, and then what are you going to do about it?
Totally agree. Most underrated security practice enterprises are skipping or not paying attention to.
I think they
Identity.
pay attention to. Yeah, I think. Yeah, of course, it's identity security. No, I think. Look, I think one of the things that's always surprising is how companies struggle with patch management, and it is because it's the basics. Make sure your stuff is up to date. I think there's still I want to own all the software. I want to run it on premise. Like cloud helps you make it so much better, but cloud creates different challenges that you have to be aware of. So, but I think patch management and running your own software to me is still is something that people do, and I just don't get it.
Be great at the basics. I think it's
Yeah,
totally right.
be great at the
Blocking and
basics.
tackling. Yeah. One thing every CISO should do differently in the next 90 days that they probably weren't doing before.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should really make sure they know where their sensitive assets are, and that how are they thinking about AI talking to those things.
Yeah.
I think there is there's this. Sorry, this is a long answer, so I'll try
No,
to
it's okay. Go for it.
keep it tight. There's this process in security called threat modeling. And it's super important for being able to figure out where your priorities are and what kinds of controls you need in place. And I think, threat modeling and really understanding where your sensitive assets are and how AI or other types of systems are going to talk to it. I think it's a super critical thing that some people overlook. And so you should do that.
Yeah, it's a great one. Last one. One decision enterprises should never delegate to an AI agent.
Oof. I think any sort of destruction of customer content, like look, we're responsible for getting rid of customer environments when customers attrit or when they ask us to erase stuff. I don't think you should ever let AI do that, because if an AI has the permission to destroy stuff, they will. And they'll do it on accident. They'll do it as a request. Hey, can you clean this up? Can you clean that up? And I think you should not allow AI to do destruction.
Yeah, it's a great call out. They also may think backing up thinking is something is the logical thing to do, and therefore it's not deleted. It's really interesting to think through those. You said it earlier, and that's really been resonating with me. Is the AI inherently is not evil or good? It's just trying to do the thing you told it to do, and sometimes those are very logical decisions that are anti to what you want to have done.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I need you. Can you help me clean up this database in the test environment? But it also has permission in the production environment. Erases those things, and we saw in a real customer example that we published today that happened. And so there are things you just should not allow it to do, or that you should put more controls around.
Yeah. Well, listen, Art, I super appreciate it. I know you're super busy. I know you're traveling internationally.
It's my pleasure.
So thank you for taking the time. Really good, timely discussion. The only caveat with this one is the rate at which your industry is moving. And I think the whole industry, we might have to do some audio overdubs in the next week or two as something new comes up.
We may have to change some of the things I say. Yeah, I'll come back and say, you know what, that was different and it's changed now. So we're gonna change that. So
exactly. But
Derek,
what a time
really
to be alive. And again, thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you guys for all that you're doing to make it easier for it to be safe for us all to be adopting and leveraging this like unbelievably powerful tool that is in front of us right now.
It's my great pleasure, and look, I love this space and the industry, and it's been an honor to be able to try to serve. So I think it's great.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Right on. Take it easy.